Good morning. Welcome to Cedars Unitarian Universalist Church. We are the North Kitsap Bainbridge Island Church here in Washington State, and we are so happy that you are here with us. My name is Penny Brewer. I'm one of the worship associates, and I will be joined by Catherine J., who is our faith formation director, and with the guest speaker, who is attorney Jon Zulauf, who co-founded the Seattle Clemency Project. Before we get any further, though, I do want to make sure that we mention to acknowledge that members of our congregation occupy the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Coast Salish people, the Suquamish, the Duwamish, the Sklallam, and the Chimicum. And these lands were ceded with duress through the Point Elliott and Point No Point treaties. We are grateful guests on these lands and affirm Indigenous sovereignty, both past and present. This acknowledgement does not substitute for the need to build authentic relationships with modern-day members of these tribes and to learn about their living culture and history. And I know many of us are doing just that. Our faith community is sustained by the generosity of its members. Your contribution will nourish the spiritual growth of our community through weekly worship and ongoing programs that cultivate connection, belonging, sharing, and caring. Included in the video description and displayed on the screen is information to make a contribution to Cedars through our PayPal account. Please take time, either now or later, in the service to make a contribution to help sustain Cedars. Your gifts are greatly appreciated. Thank you. And now a big welcome. Cedars is committed to being a welcoming and inclusive community. In all the beauty of languages, cultures, and skin tones that come together in your uniqueness, we welcome you. In all the ways you experience and express gender, in the beauty of who and how you love, we welcome you. With all the religious and ethical traditions that inform your spiritual life, we welcome you. Whether you are feeling whole, feeling broken, or anywhere in between, we welcome you. No matter how long you've been away, nor how soon you will return, we welcome you. You are invited to join us today and always with an open mind, a loving heart, and willing hands. Like most of us, this period has been so intense and difficult for me. I go from being agitated and fearful to balance. I go back and forth between agitation and balance. And I'm meditating multiple times a day just to try to keep myself clear. When I am at my most balanced self, I remind myself that this violence comes from fear. Our world is changing, and the people attacking Congress feel their world is disappearing, and they're right. At last, we are seeing the injustice that has occurred since our country's inception, the destruction of indigenous cultures and people, the enslavement of the African that now continues with our new Jim Crow, putting thousands of Black and brown men in prison for drug and small offenses. And we saw clearly the way white invaders of the Capitol were treated compared to the protesters this summer with Black Lives Matter. And then I breathe, and as I witness the possibility of change with Biden, Harris, and the new, very diverse cabinet, a group that wants to bring kindness and compassion back into our lives. We want to remember and celebrate Martin Luther King Day, what he stood for and what he asked all of us to do. He said, "Law and order exist for the purpose of establishing justice, and when they fail in their purpose, they become dangerously structured dams that block the flow of social progress." The hope of a secure and livable world lies with disciplined nonconformists who are dedicated to justice, peace, and brotherhood. Robert Kennedy said, "We can move in that direction as a country in greater polarization, Black people among Black, white among white, filled with hatred toward one another. Or we can make an effort, as Martin Luther King Jr. did, to understand and to comprehend and replace that violence, that stain of bloodshed that has spread across our land with an effort to understand compassion and love. What we need in the United States is not division. What we need in the United States is not violence, but is love and wisdom and compassion toward one another, and a feeling of justice toward those who still suffer within our country, whether they be white or Black. Today, we will learn about an organization that works to bring justice and forgiveness to prisoners ready to lead a righteous life. I dedicate the lighting of the chalice in the name of Martin Luther King and our quest for justice and dignity for all.
As we come together to worship, we remind ourselves to treat all people kindly because they are our brothers and sisters, to take care of the earth because it is our home, and to live lives full of love and goodness because that is how we will all become the best that we can be.
Our reflection today is something by Reverend Lynn Cox. Spirit of life, ever adapting and renewing, we come together this morning with yearnings that do not match. We yearn for stability, for even one moment of feeling like we know what's going on, for the ability to predict and prepare for what is coming next. Yet we also yearn for change. We ache for a world that turns aside from racism, violence, dehumanization, and disregard for suffering. We pray for a change in the illness, the grief, the isolation, and incarceration and vulnerability of our loved ones. We reach for connections that will remind us that we are worthy of who we are and help us to become our better selves. Hold us in the heart of both and cradle us in the mystery. Cherish us in the eternal presence of love and encourage us on the path of growth and development. As individuals and as people, help us to become who we are called to be. Lead us to open pathways to deeper wisdom through reconciliation, self-respect, and mutual respect, compassion, owning and making amends for our mistakes. Move us to express and live in gratitude for the beauty of this world, the loving people in our lives, and this day of possibility. Thank you.
Today, I'd like to tell you a story that I learned from the Tapestry of Faith, the RE curriculum of the UUA. The story is about two friends from Persia, but it comes to us from a writer in Brazil, so it is definitely multicultural. This is a story about two friends named Musa and Ali. And Musa and Ali have been friends for a very long time. They are young men, but they've known each other for most of their lives. They've known each other for so long that they are comfortable going on a journey together. They're comfortable going on vacation. And that is what they do. So Musa and Ali live in a small village, and they decide that they want to go see the world beyond the mountains. And so they pack up their camels and they set off on their journey. And along the way, Musa and Ali come about midway through to a point beside a river. It's a lovely place with lots of shade, plenty of trees, and so they think this is a great place to sit down and have lunch. And that is exactly what they do. And while they're having lunch, suddenly Musa and Ali begin to argue with one another. Now, this has happened before. Musa and Ali have been friends for a long time, and so they have had their share of arguments. But this time, the argument takes a different turn. They get more and more upset, more and more angry, and suddenly Ali reaches out and slaps Musa across the face. Musa is stunned. His friend has never hit him before. Without thinking, Musa raises his hand to respond. But then he puts it back down and he thinks, I love Ali. That could have been me. I also lost my temper. I cannot hit my friend. And so instead, Musa gets up and he goes over to the woods and he finds a stick. And while Ali looks on, Musa writes the words, "Today my friend Ali hit me," in the sand by the riverbank. And then Musa sits back down next to Ali and they watch the words slowly drift away in the sand. And by the time the words are gone, by the time the wind has sent the words away, Ali has apologized and the friends have made up. And so they get back on their camels and they continue on their journey. And they go up and down and through the mountains and they come to new places and they see new things. And that is not what this story is about. And so on their way back from this wonderful experience that they had that we are not going to hear about, they find themselves at the same riverbank. And they think, we will stop here again. It was a lovely place. And so they do. And the river, this time it is a different season. The river is much higher. And Musa and Ali decide to go for a swim to wash away the dirt of their trip. And Musa jumps in first and suddenly realizes that the river is much higher and much stronger in current than he expected. And Musa begins to flail about in the water. Musa begins to drown. And Ali sees his friend struggling and he jumps in and rescues him, pulls him back onto the bank, gasping. And both of the friends sit there, wet, scared, stunned, breathing hard, until Musa, after he recovers, gets up, goes over to the camel bags, and takes out a knife. His friend Ali looks at him. What is he doing? And Musa takes his knife and he finds a large rock near the river and he carves into the rock, "Today, my friend Ali saved me." It takes some time. Ali is confused. And when Musa is done, Ali says, "Musa, what are you doing? The last time you were here, you wrote in sand, and this time you are writing in rock. Why are you doing this?" And Musa said, "Ali, my friend, when someone hurts us the way that you did the last time we were here, if we can, we need to write that hurt in sand, acknowledge it, and then let the wind blow it away. But if someone does a kindness for us, if someone saves us, we need to write that action in stone. We need to etch that action in our hearts so that we remember it forever." And that is what I've done, because I will never forget the kindness you've done for me. And time and the wind have already made me forget the argument that we had. And so after they dried, they hugged, they got back on the camels, and wiser than they were when they left, Musa and Ali went home to their village and lived a long and happy life. And that is my story. Please join me in a time of meditation and prayer. Let's begin this time by taking a big, deep cleansing breath together. And out. And one more. Just keep breathing, friends. That is part of our call as a community of love. Just keep breathing. Just one more breath. Just one more breath for justice. Just one more breath for freedom. Just one more breath to remind people that everyone is worthy and everyone is worthy of love. Spirit of life, Spirit of love, help us be the people that we long to be. Spirit of life, Spirit of love, help us lean into our discomfort. Help us to take one more move towards what we know needs to be done, no matter how hard it seems. Help us to open our hearts to the despair and pain of our neighbors and our community, our nation and our world. And when our hearts are open, when we have been cracked open by this pain, help us to not shut down, but to open up even more, to reach out, to do what we know needs to be done. Help us to work for justice, to help us to work to build a beloved community. Help us to build a community that we and our children want to live in, that everyone's children deserve to live in. Again, help us to be the people that we long to be. Help us to remember to give thanks, that even as we know that there is so much wrong in our world, help us to see the beauty that is all around us, because that beauty sustains us, gets us up for another day of working for justice. Help us see and appreciate the blue skies when they come, to appreciate that all of the rain will bring great green and beauty. Help us to see that the people around us love us and want us to be well. Help us to be grateful for all that we have been given, so that we can also give to others. Please, please, in these times of anxiety and fear and chaos and uncertainty, help us find a grounding that can keep us going, that keeps our eyes on what is most important. And what is most important is love in its active form. Let us be actors of love in the days ahead. May it be so. Amen.
When we are singing, Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me. Thank you for your interest in the Seattle Clemency Project. I'm Jon Zulauf. I'm the founder of the project, and I've been a lawyer in Seattle for more than 40 years. My wife and I aren't strangers to Bainbridge Island. We have lived there on and off during the last 40 years. First on Mandus Olson Road, and then later near the water's edge on Lytle Road. We came back to Seattle because our children and grandchildren are here. The Seattle Clemency Project was started 5 years ago. Its mission is to match volunteer lawyers with reformed and deserving prisoners to help them draft clemency petitions. We have a second mission, which is to match volunteer lawyers with immigrants who are about to be deported because of very old criminal convictions. In both cases, we search for good candidates for clemency and pardons, and we match them with volunteer lawyers. In a few minutes, I'll introduce you to two of our clients, Dwight Griffin and Sarai Pinn. That will give you a feel for what motivates us to do this work. At this moment in history, there's a growing awareness that the criminal justice system needs repair. Brian Stevenson talks about over-incarceration and systemic racism, with the result that our system puts more people in prison and for longer periods of time than any country in the world. In 1970, we had about 300,000 people in jail or prison. Today, we have 2.3 million people. We have today 2 million more people locked up than we did in 1970. It's estimated that 1 in 3 Black boys will end up in jail or prison during their lifetimes. 6 million people are on probation or parole. It is a system that needs attention. It's a system that needs repair. The Seattle Clemency Project addresses one aspect of the problem, and that is that in Washington state, our criminal justice system doesn't recognize redemption. We don't reward rehabilitation. We don't honor and reward personal growth. We no longer have a mechanism to release a person when they have transformed their lives in prison. The problem has been made worse because in Washington state, we have abolished parole. Prisoners can no longer go before a parole board to argue they're reformed. The parole board was abolished in 1984. And then the problem got worse, again, because of mandatory sentencings. Our state passed a 3-strike law in the 1980s, making life without the possibility of parole sentences mandatory. Effectively, what the law says is that we are throwing people into a trash can. We as a society are saying that your life has no meaning and you have no chance of reform. And we have hundreds and hundreds of prisoners sitting in prison with a life sentence. At the Seattle Clemency Project, we try to expose that lie. In fact, people can change. People can transform their lives. People can go through redemption, and we see it every day. We find remarkable people in prison, match them with stunningly good lawyers, and tell their stories. Without a lawyer advocating their case, a prisoner has almost no chance of being granted clemency. With a lawyer, there's hope. And the legal community in Seattle and Kitsap County and Pierce counties have stepped up. The Seattle Clemency Project has nearly 170 lawyer volunteers for our project. They have been matched with nearly 200 prisoners and immigrants. More than 700 prisoners have asked for our help. So far, nearly 50 people have been released from prison. 25 of those had life without the possibility of parole sentences. 15 immigrants have been saved from deportation. A good deal of my time is spent screening prisoners to find the very best candidates for clemency. When we identify a good candidate, we meet them at the prison or talk by phone, again, part of the vetting process. And typically our clients are older, men in their 60s who have spent 20 years in prison. When we find a good candidate, we start searching for volunteer lawyers. The large law firms in Seattle have all stepped up. We have lawyers from Perkins Coie, Davis Wright Tremaine, K&L Gates, Lane Powell, Foster Pepper, now Foster Garvey, and dozens of other law firms. Most of our lawyers have never drafted a clemency petition before, so we train them to do this work. Once a petition is drafted, it goes to the Clemency and Pardons Board. If they think the petition has merit, they set it on for a hearing in which the lawyer presents his or her arguments that the individual is extraordinary and deserving of clemency. At the end of the hearing, the board of 5 members votes. If they vote to recommend clemency, the file is sent to the governor for his signature on an order of commutation. The governor has discretion. He can follow the recommendation or refuse to grant clemency. Finally, the Seattle Clemency Project has hired re-entry specialists to help prisoners upon their release with housing, job training, and job placement. We also help with the more mundane parts of life, getting a cell phone, getting access to a computer, helping with resumes, getting a driver's license, and mentoring. We want to make sure that after they are released, they are successful. If you want to learn more about the Seattle Clemency Project, you can Google seattleclemencyproject.org. At this point, I want to introduce you to 2 of our clients. Dwight Griffin, a 3-striker who was sentenced to serve the rest of his life in prison. We were able to find Dwight an exceptional lawyer, Jennifer Horwitz, who met with Dwight in prison several times, met his wife, gathered all the prison records to show that Dwight was extraordinary, filed a petition, and took Dwight's case to a hearing before the Clemency and Pardons Board. Dwight was granted clemency 2 years ago.
I always thought, well, love can overcome. And, sometimes it didn't really work out, but, we stuck with it.
I never had the sense that they would put me in prison for the rest of my life. That would basically be a death sentence.
I didn't really have any hopes that he was ever going to come home. I mean, the 3 strikes was with no possibility of parole, and so that, it was pretty cut and dry. It didn't. I'll be alone forever. That's what went through my head.
It didn't seem real. When I looked in the mirror and I thought to myself, you know what? If you don't stop this madness and get this thing taken care of, you're going to die up in here, and you're going to die alone, and you're going to die a broken, bitter drug addict.
And I think that's when he changed. I screwed this up. I'm sorry, and I'm done with this.
I contacted Jon Zulauf. Of course, financially, I was not in a position to do anything for myself as far as getting representation, but Jon got a hold of me shortly thereafter.
I immediately knew when I met Dwight that he was the right client for me and the Seattle Clemency Project to represent. He had served 24 years in prison, and he had really used the time that he'd been in prison to think about how he could be a better person and to try to be a better person. When we first met, I said to him, the good news is you have a lawyer who's going to work really, really hard for you, but the bad news is I've never done one of these and I don't know how to do it. And he said, we'll figure this out together. And that's what we did.
The fact that somebody cared, the fact that somebody was willing to do what I couldn't do for myself, which was fight. So it mattered like night and day, you know. The lights were coming on.
A small number of applicants are granted a hearing. If you're granted a hearing, you prepare for the hearing and you make a presentation in front of the Clemency and Pardons Board, and the board decides that day, it's very dramatic, what their recommendation is going to be. It was one of the most high pressure, scary hearings that I've ever done, because I truly felt that someone's life was at stake. Dwight had been away from his family for 24 years, and this was his chance to get out.
It is a vote of 4-0 recommendation to the governor that he grant this petition. Sir, I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
August 31st of last year, 2018, I left that morning, and it was like being born again. You know, the nightmare can finally end, that I can finally start putting some things together and start making things right.
The Dwight today is an open book. You know, he's being honest, upfront about everything that happened, and he's not making excuses.
The best part of being home is being here with my wife. I have not been the Dwight that she married for a long, long time. And I think and I feel like I'm giving her what she started out wanting to be with, you know, that guy.
It wouldn't have been possible for Dwight to come home without Jennifer and the Clemency Project.
The Seattle Clemency Project, for me, is important, not just because of what it has done for me, but for the possibilities of what it can do for so many people that have so much to give to this world.
And now I want to introduce you to Sarai Pinn, a young woman with 2 children who was informed by federal ICE officials that she would be deported without her children to Cambodia because of an old felony conviction for drugs. Sarai had never lived in Cambodia. Her parents had fled the Khmer Rouge and fled to Thailand. Sarai was born in a refugee camp. She grew up in Aberdeen, Washington, and married young. Her husband was abusive and a criminal. One day, Sarai's husband ordered her to drive him to a drug deal. He met with an undercover police officer and was arrested. But Sarai was also arrested and charged with drug dealing. Her trial lawyer told her to take a deal, but he didn't tell her that that would result in deportation. 2 years ago, ICE officials came to Sarai's door and put her under arrest. She was about to be deported to Cambodia. I met with Sarai just after she had been taken into federal custody and shortly before she was going to be put on a plane to be permanently deported.
My parents fled Cambodia from the Khmer Rouge regime. They ended up in the refugee camp where they stayed for 10 years, and that's where I was born in 1989 when our family got the news that we were coming to America and resided in Aberdeen, Washington, where our family is. I was in a domestic violence relationship. He was really controlling, of course. You know, I had to drive him around because he didn't have a driver's license, and I just did everything that he asked. One day, he finally got caught selling drugs to undercover cop, and we both ended up getting arrested. I just found myself being processed into county jail, looking at 50 years in prison. It just felt so surreal because the whole time I'm thinking, like, what did I do? I didn't know until I was convicted was when my lawyer finally told me that, oh, there's a possibility that you are gonna get deported and there might be an ICE hold on you. Living through that and trying to live a normal, productive life was really challenging. I constantly live in fear, and I felt like I was traumatized from that fear of getting deported and separated from my kids and my family. A final incident with the guy that I was with for 10 years, he tried to kill me. My son is screaming, witnessed the whole thing. He did 9 months, got released, and they didn't even recommend anger management or any rehabilitation classes except for drug and alcohol. And 2 months later, I get a letter from ICE that I need to be detained. They're gonna go ahead and set me up with the interview with the Cambodian consulate where I will be deported. I just couldn't see a clear picture. All I saw was my life kept on going downhill. I just felt like I'm never gonna get out of this situation because I've looked everywhere to try to help myself research how do I fix this issue, this legal part. And the whole time I'm thinking, like, I wish somebody know my situation and know, like, I'm really innocent, and I cannot believe that I was going through all of this, being kicked out of a country literally for something that I had no involvement in. I was sitting at IHOP with my 2-year-old boy, like looking at him like, this is like the last time I'm gonna spend with my son. And as I'm going through my phone, like just looking up lawyers, trying to find somebody to help me, I get a message from a lawyer through Facebook, told me that she wants to help me, and if I needed the help, to give her a call. She left her number, and I called her right away. And she told me that she knew a Cambodian anti-deportation group who might have some resources that can help me in my situation. And to me, I'm like, wow, my luck is finally changing. For once, like I felt like I have hope. That's where Jon from Seattle Clemency Project reached out to me. And he was the only lawyer who knew the legal part in my case. The only person that told me that they can save me was him. He told me that he can help me hopefully get my permanent residency back. And I've never had a lawyer been able to tell me that. And that was what I wanted, was to at least get that back. During that time, I already met with the Cambodian consulate, interviewed with them for them to issue me a travel document. And as I'm waiting in the detention center in Texas, Seattle Clemency Project went for a vacate. To my surprise, the prosecutor actually agreed to vacate my conviction. I had less than a week left before ICE was gonna put me on a plane, and I'm going. And just to my surprise again, I couldn't believe like everything was happening in my favor. The next day, NERP didn't even hesitate. They filed the motion right away to terminate my deportation. And on Mother's Day, actually, was when I was released from ICE custody. Seattle Clemency Project gives people like me a second chance.
The Seattle Clemency Project was able to have a profound effect on the lives of Dwight and Sarai. It was such a pleasure to work with them. As I speak today, we have dozens and dozens of lawyers who have volunteered to do the same work for other prisoners and immigrants who have transformed their lives. The Seattle Clemency Project is making a difference. Thank you for listening. I appreciate being able to come into your congregation and into your homes. Thank you.
Go free, where the oil of gladness dissolves all morning. Oh, we'll build a promised land that can be. Come build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. We'll build a land where we bring the good tidings to all the afflicted and all those who mourn, and we'll give them garlands instead of ashes. Oh, we'll build a land where peace is born. Come build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. We'll be a land building up ancient cities, raising up devastations from old, restoring ruins of generations. Oh, we'll build a land of people so bold. Come build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. Come build a land where the mantles of praises resound from spirits once faint and once weak, where the ghosts of righteousness stand her people. Oh, come build the land, my people we seek. Come build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Let us end our service today with a quote from Martin Luther King. I refuse to accept the view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war that the bright daybreak of peace and brotherhood can never become a reality. I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word. May we continue to speak out against injustice, to speak even if we're afraid our words will not be heard or welcomed. May the spirit of Dr. Martin Luther King continue to flow through our daily living. And may we have the courage of Dr. King as we continue to stand up for justice, reconciliation, truth, despite challenge and controversy. So go in peace, go in love, go in connection. Blessed be.